The Chemistry Lab Explosion, October 20th, 1966, Chicago, Illinois. A cold autumn afternoon at Bowen High School. Inside room 212. A group of juniors gathered around their chemistry teacher as he prepared a simple demonstration involving basic gases, something he had done many times before. The windows rattled from the wind outside, but inside the class was calm, even cheerful. 16-year-old Robert Drake sat in the front row. He loved science, always asking questions, always the first to volunteer. That day, he leaned forward with the kind of excitement only a student who truly loves learning can show. At 1:37 p.m., the teacher set up a small metal container connected to a burner. The class watched as he turned the valve. But the equipment, which hadn't been serviced for years, malfunctioned. A leak allowed gas to fill the lower end of the table without anyone noticing. When the teacher struck the ignition, a sudden burst of pressure filled the room. The sound was loud, sharp, and shocking, like a heavy object dropped from a height. Books fell off desks. Students screamed and ducked. The teacher was thrown back but remained conscious. Robert, closest to the table, suffered the worst impact. When the smoke cleared, classmates rushed to help him. A counselor ran in from the hallway, directing everyone to leave immediately while calling for the school nurse and paramedics. Emergency crews arrived within minutes. They carried Robert out on a stretcher while students stood outside the building crying, hugging one another, whispering prayers. Despite fast medical attention, Robert passed away shortly after reaching the hospital due to severe trauma from the blast. The official investigation that followed found multiple failures. The gas valve had been reported as sticky 2 months earlier. The ventilation system in room 212 was not working at full capacity. The equipment had not been updated since 1949. In the school board's report, one line stood out. This tragedy was preventable with modern safety measures. Bowen High School immediately shut down its chemistry labs and replaced aging equipment throughout the district. For Robert's classmates, the memory of that day never left them. A boy excited to learn, to explore, to experiment, gone because a school system trusted outdated tools and ignored warning signs. A place meant for curiosity and growth became a site of loss, reminding parents and educators across the nation that safety in classrooms must always come first. The classroom ceiling collapse. March 14th, 1988, Brooklyn, New York. Public School 133 was a busy place that Monday morning. Students filled the hallways carrying notebooks and lunch bags, teachers hurried between rooms, and the sound of sneakers squeaking on the polished floors echoed everywhere. Inside room 3B, Miss Ramirez's fifth-grade class settled in for reading time. 10-year-old Angela Soto sat near the back next to the window. She was quiet, polite, and always early to class. That morning, she had brought a new book from home and showed it proudly to her friends. No one noticed the fine dust on her desk, a sign of something wrong above them. At 9:42 a.m., as Ms. Ramirez read aloud from a chapter book, several students heard a faint cracking sound. It was soft, almost like something shifting behind a wall. The teacher paused, glanced up at the ceiling tiles, then continued. Cracks had been reported in the room before, but maintenance staff had marked them as cosmetic. Seconds later, a deep rumble moved across the ceiling. Before anyone could react, a large section of plaster gave way and collapsed. Desks toppled. Dust filled the air. Students screamed as the room turned into chaos. Ms. Ramirez pushed several children toward the door, coughing as she tried to see through the cloud of debris. Angela had been sitting directly beneath the failing beam. When the dust began to settle, classmates and staff rushed to help her. The school nurse arrived quickly, followed by firefighters and paramedics who had been called by the front office. They worked urgently, but Angela had suffered life-ending injuries from the collapse. The entire school was evacuated within minutes. Parents ran to the gates, crying as teachers tried to calm students who were covered in dust and shaking with fear. Fire officials stepped in to secure the building. The investigation revealed troubling details. Water damage in room 3B had gone unaddressed for years. Reports of sagging ceiling tiles were filed 5 times between 1984 to 1987. Structural inspectors had recommended renovations that were never scheduled. A city engineer wrote in his official statement, "The failure was the result of long-term neglect." The tragedy shocked the community. The school district immediately began emergency repairs not only at PS 133, but across dozens of aging buildings in New York City. New rules were introduced requiring yearly structural inspections for all public schools. For Angela's family and classmates, the loss was unforgettable. A quiet Monday morning turned into a disaster because warning signs were ignored. A classroom meant to be one of the safest places in a child's life became the setting of a devastating accident that changed the city's approach to school safety forever. The shop class machine tragedy. November 18th, 1977, Tulsa, Oklahoma. The morning bell had just rung at East Central High School. In the Industrial Arts Wing, students walked into the metal shop, the smell of oil and warm machinery already filling the air. For many teenagers, shop class was the highlight of the day, a place where they could build, shape, and create with their hands. 17-year-old Mark Ellison was one of those students. He loved working with tools and hoped to become a mechanic after graduation. That day, he was excited to finish a small engine project he had spent 2 weeks assembling. His teacher, Mr. Collins, a patient instructor with decades of experience, prepared the class for their daily safety reminders. At 10:06 a.m., the students turned on their assigned machines. Mark worked at a large metal lathe near the back wall. It was an older model, donated to the school years earlier. The machine functioned well, but had a worn safety guard that often needed adjusting. Maintenance had been requested, but the part was on a long wait list. Mark secured a piece of metal and switched on the lathe. It spun smoothly at first, but a loose corner of his work apron brushed against the rotating piece. The fabric caught instantly. The pull was sudden and powerful. Mark lost his balance, and the scene changed in seconds. Students nearby shouted for Mr. Collins, who ran across the room and hit the emergency shutoff. The room fell silent except for the slowing machine. The teacher and 2 students worked quickly to free Mark. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but Mark had suffered fatal trauma in the entanglement. The news spread through the school within an hour. Students cried in the hallways. Teachers canceled afternoon tests. The principal gathered everyone in the auditorium to speak calmly about what had happened while offering support and counselors. The official investigation made several findings. The lathe's safety guard had been flagged as urgent repair 3 months earlier. The apron Mark wore was standard, but the design did not meet newer safety recommendations. The school's shop equipment dated back to the 1950s and lacked modern protection features. An OSHA examiner wrote in his report, "This incident underlines the importance of updated machinery and consistent training." East Central High closed its Industrial Arts Wing for the rest of the school year. All machines were replaced with newer, compliant models, and strict clothing rules were added to prevent similar accidents. For Mark's family and classmates, the tragedy was a heartbreaking reminder of how quickly an ordinary class activity can turn dangerous when aging equipment and small oversights combine. A room meant for learning and skill building became the setting for a loss that would change the school's safety standards forever. The Bacterial Outbreak, May 6, 2004, Carrollton, Georgia. At Central Middle School, Thursday mornings were usually calm. Students chatted in the hallways, teachers prepared lessons, and spring sunlight filled the rooms. Inside classroom 14, Ms. Dawson's 7th grade science class was settling in for a unit on ecosystems. No one had any idea that something invisible in the room was about to change their lives. 12-year-old Brandon Miles, a friendly boy who loved baseball and video games, walked in smiling. He wasn't feeling his best that morning, but he brushed it off. A mild stomach ache, nothing unusual. He placed his backpack under his desk and joined his friends as class began. By 10:20 a.m., Brandon looked pale. Ms. Dawson noticed him resting his head on his arm. She asked if he needed to visit the nurse. Brandon nodded weakly. Another student walked him down the hallway. The nurse checked his temperature and assumed it might be a flu or food-related illness. She gave him water and called his mother to pick him up. Within hours, Brandon's condition worsened sharply. His mother rushed him to Tanner Medical Center. By the evening, doctors identified something far more serious than a flu, a fast-moving bacterial infection that had begun to affect his major systems. Despite intense treatment, Brandon passed away the next morning. The school community was stunned. A healthy student had gone from mild symptoms to a fatal illness in less than a day. Out of caution, the school closed classroom 14 for deep cleaning and asked all parents to monitor their children for symptoms. Rumors spread quickly, but officials emphasized calm and transparency. The Georgia Department of Public Health launched an investigation. Their findings showed Brandon had unknowingly contracted a rare, aggressive strain of bacteria days before. The classroom itself was not the source, but close contact settings allowed symptoms to appear suddenly. No other students developed the infection. In the official statement, a health officer wrote, "This was an isolated medical event, not a school-wide threat." The school brought in grief counselors for weeks. Students left cards, drawings, and baseballs covered with messages on Brandon's desk. Teachers reminded families of the importance of reporting sudden health changes, even when they seem mild. Though the classroom was cleared and reopened, the memory remained. Brandon's passing showed how quickly an unseen illness can turn serious, and how important early medical attention can be. What began as a normal school day became a heartbreaking reminder that even healthy children can face unpredictable medical emergencies. The Heatstroke Tragedy in Texas. June 9, 2011, Austin, Texas. Summer had hit early that year, and the temperature outside Crockett High School was already above 100 degrees Fahrenheit by mid-morning. Inside classroom 204, the air conditioning unit had been reported broken for 2 days. A work order had been placed, but repairs were delayed. That Thursday, students gathered for their end-of-year algebra exam in a room that felt more like a greenhouse than a classroom. 16-year-old Daniel Price, a quiet student who loved drawing and spent most of his free time sketching superheroes, arrived carrying a bottle of water. He joked with a friend that the room felt hotter than the football field. The teacher opened both doors and set up 2 small fans, hoping it would help. At 11:15 a.m., halfway through the exam, Daniel started feeling dizzy. He wiped sweat from his forehead and tried to keep writing, but the heat became overwhelming. The teacher noticed him resting his head on his desk and asked if he needed a break. Daniel nodded and stood up slowly, but his legs were unsteady. He walked into the hallway toward cooler air, but within moments he collapsed. Students nearby called for help. The school nurse rushed in and began cooling measures while someone dialed 911. Paramedics arrived quickly and transported Daniel to St. David's Medical Center. Doctors worked for hours, but Daniel's body temperature had risen too high for too long. He passed away that afternoon from severe heat-related complications. The news spread across the school almost instantly. Students gathered outside in the shade, crying and holding one another. Parents demanded answers. That same evening, the Austin Independent School District opened an investigation. Findings showed the classroom AC unit had failed on June 7th. Maintenance logged it as non-urgent, despite high temperatures. Indoor temperatures reached 104 degrees Fahrenheit during the exam. No backup cooling plan existed for heat emergencies. In the district report, one line stood out. Environmental conditions inside the classroom were unsafe for sustained activity. The tragedy triggered major changes. The district ordered inspections of all cooling units, introduced heat response protocols, and required teachers to immediately relocate students if indoor temperatures surpassed safe levels. Daniel's classmates placed drawings and notes on his desk the next day. The school held an assembly honoring his artistic talent and gentle personality. A room meant for learning had become dangerously hot, and a preventable delay turned a simple exam day into a loss that deeply affected the entire community.